Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for the third episode of the Dose of Desi. Today is Saturday, December 4th, 2021. Can't believe it's December already. My name is Hassan, and unfortunately, we're not here in person this time like we were last time, which was a lot of fun, but we are back in our usual virtual setting, and I'm joined, as always, by my co host, Udith. How are you?
That's right. Hey man, I'm good. Excited to be here. Excited to get going with another episode. I just want to give a quick disclaimer for this episode. We are both a little bit under the weather, and if we cough or take a moment, just giving you a heads up that might happen. So for today's episode, we got the inspiration from our Twitter poll. If you haven't already followed us on Twitter, you can check us out. We posted a poll there a week or two ago, and then everyone who voted in the poll voted for pandemic life as the next subject that they want to hear about, to hear us talk about. And in fact, I think everybody has their own story of pandemic life. So it basically consists of all the joys, pains, struggles, unexpected happenings, and things we've learned throughout this experience so far in the pandemic, and it's still going. So
True, very, very true. Excited to talk about that topic. Lots to say. And as we do this live, we love to hear from all of you as well. So please make sure if you're watching live to share your thoughts and experiences in the chat during the episode. We will read the chat as well. Speaking of which, shout out to Munib, who says sup in the chat. What's up, man? How are you doing? Thanks for stopping by again. Appreciate it. Definitely, make sure you post your comments and we'll read them as we go. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I think we wanted to start with really establishing, when this pandemic really truly hit, where were we at the beginning of all of this? And how did it kind of impact us initially? So do you want to share your
actually, question for you: have you ever been in the midst of a pandemic before, or an endemic, which is like a smaller version of a pandemic, or like a localized version of a pandemic within a certain
No, I mean,
region?
I guess, like, would you consider like the what was it, the swine flu, like when we were in college, like was kind of happening a bit? Because I remember there was at one point where I did feel sick and I had similar symptoms of swine flu, and I remember I actually went home immediately from college at that time, and then I found out, I ended up not having it, and I came back soon after. But I do remember like that being a little bit of a panic. But that's the only experience I can think of.
It's always got to be some sort of the flu, right?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
like variant of the flu. But yeah, I don't think I have. I know when I was in Albania, they had like a small outbreak of, I don't know, like shingles or something. I don't remember, something at the school across the street from me. So my host mom was calling me, or somebody had called me, and they were like, "Yeah, stay away from the school." So I'm like, okay, I'm not really. It's winter time. I don't really leave my house that much anyway. So
Yeah.
um, yeah. But you said you wanted me to start with where I was during the pandemic, or
Yeah. You want to
at the
share?
start of the pandemic rather than during the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Like kind of how did it, where it started and where you ended up, I guess, from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the very beginning of the pandemic, I remember it being like March, like second week of March, roughly, right? Oh,
Yeah.
something was crawling on my leg there. Um, I was actually in almost close to the end of my service in Albania when I was in the Peace Corps. That was March was officially like my last month, and some of the volunteers had started leaving already, but I had extended my service for 2 more months until June to finish a grant that I was working on. And so it was like in the middle of the grant, and I had like all sorts of deadlines, and it all just went crazy after a while. But I remember getting like right when the news was going around the world that this is a possibility, that this is happening. like a week before everything actually started shutting down. Um, they told us that, you know, there's a big chance coming down the road that either they're going to tell us to like stay in place for a long period of time or tell us to leave in a short period of time. Um, so yeah, so I just, you know, I went out and I bought like all these groceries that week, and I was like, I'm gonna be
Mm-hmm.
here forever. Like, you know, might as well just camp out. And I spent like, you know, in Peace Corps, you don't get a lot of money to like afford all these things. So I went out and I like spent a bunch of money thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna be home. You know, there's not gonna be any food. I'm not gonna go out much. So I spent like a chunk of my money doing that, only to find out a few days later they were like, yeah, you have like 24 to 36 hours to pack up all your stuff and leave. And I was like, I just bought all my groceries. So
Oh man.
yeah, that's where I was at. What about you? Where were you at, and how did you manage?
Yeah, so I mean, I was at home and basically just working and about to start teaching another semester at a university as well, a class at a university. And so, I remember with work, it was like, all right, we're just going for the next couple weeks. We're going remote, so I had a laptop that I took home and kind of like seen as like for the next couple weeks initially. And so we're always busy with work, but for the most part, we just kind of just rolled with it and started working from home and dealing with slow internet and stuff, and those types of connection challenges and stuff, but otherwise rolled with it. And then with school or teaching, it was like I taught, maybe it was like a week of class, like 2 class sessions, and then it was like, hey, maybe in another week we're going to be going remote. So I was like, okay, I have a little bit of time to prepare. And then like the next day or so, it's like, actually, no, we're going remote like now. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So next class session. So I immediately had to like build a bunch of stuff, kind of, figure out what I was going to do for that. So, a little bit of that transition, but I still stayed in the same, local area at home. So in that regard, I was still in the same place. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember all the connection issues that were happening because literally, like, I mean, I would have thought like, okay, you know, the internet is robust enough that it can handle it, but now that suddenly everybody's hopping on, you know, online, I remember like Zoom stock like
Yeah.
skyrocketing and like everybody's internet connection just faltering, and yeah, it was
Zoom
interesting.
became like a household name now. It's like everybody's like, oh, I'm just Zooming with people. Like that's just, the
Yeah,
word you use for video chatting now with people.
which prior to that, just a couple of years before that happened, I think Zoom had come out with like some flaws or something, right? Like some bugs that
Oh, I don't
they,
know.
yeah, like it wasn't the most reliable, and then it became this like robust thing that everybody relied on.
Mhm.
I don't remember exactly when that was, but I remember hearing something about it at some point. But yeah, so now that we've both shared that, actually, what were the first 6 months of your pandemic like? So I guess from like March to like September. Um,
Yeah. Oh
how
man.
did you
And
how did you spend it, and like what were the challenges, and what did you learn like in terms of like social life, and how did that affect your social life?
oh man, yeah. So for one, we ended up like with work, for example, they ended up giving us complete PCs to work from home. So they actually pretty early on decided, the lease ended in the building that our administrative department was working out of, or at least it was going to end in a few months. So they were already kind of considering where to move and all that. So pretty early on in the pandemic, they were like, you know what, we're not going to renew the lease because if we're working remotely and it seems to be working now, let's just do that. Save on costs. So they sent us equipment and everything. So I knew pretty early on in the pandemic, whereas there's some people that were like, oh, I don't know how long I'll be working remotely. Will it be a few weeks, few months, or what's the deal? Pretty early on, I knew like this is the new normal now. So I will permanently be working from home. So in that way, I really tried to embrace kind of that sort of style of work and dealing with that, which the nice side was not having to commute. That was the very, very, nice positive that came out of it. But the just getting used to working from home was like kind of had to reset up the office. I had to get like an Ethernet jack installed, and in my office to have like a direct connection to, do all sorts of stuff. So it was like, a little bit of a setup, but otherwise, that was, I guess, one nice thing that came out of the pandemic early on, which was cool. But the other thing that also happened in those first 6 months is my wife Maheen and I found out that we were going to be having a baby. So it was also not only adjusting to that, remote work life, but also adjusting to a whole new, life coming into the world and trying to, plan for that. So in a way, to be honest, like, yeah, it was a little challenging in terms of not getting to go out as much and see friends as easily, but also we had a lot on our plate anyways, and we were able to really take the time at home to like set up the nursery, and I like cleaned out this one storage room and reorganized things. So I feel like we were pretty productive in those first 6 months, just because we had a lot to do, and since there wasn't much else to do during that time, we were able to get things done. So that was nice as well. Yeah, what about you? How did those 6 months go for you?
Yeah, I can definitely tell you, but before we address that, I saw some more chats come through. So Munib said it was very unreal, and I didn't think the pandemic at first was going to be like swine flu. Yeah, I honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I was just like, why is everybody panicking? Like, there's so much happening. And I remember getting stuck in Germany for a little bit, for like a day or two. And then he also said, not to sound selfish, but working from home was the best thing. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's like hit or miss. Some people absolutely loved it, and others absolutely just despised it, or at least after a while despised it. I know people's relationships, some of them became strong, and some people's like value systems changed, whereas other people's relationships like fell apart, and they were like, I am around you 24/7, get away from me. Like, so it was just interesting, but we can chat about that some more in a bit. The first 6 months for me, honestly, they were tough. They were tough. I had a life in Albania. I thought, at least I thought I had a life in Albania. I mean, from January on, it was more challenging for me because of some of the personal things I was going through, in terms of, I'd gone through a breakup, and that didn't really help.
Yeah.
Just I process these types of things very slowly. So it takes me months upon months sometimes to process these kind of things. So yeah, from January on, I really just wasn't in a good place. And then on top of that, in March, that, being told that I have to leave everything behind within a matter of like a few days. And I didn't get to say goodbye to, all the community that all the people that I knew there. It was a very sudden shift from having some social life to like zero social life for me. And to some degree, I was already used to reaching out to you, my other friend Carrie, and a couple other people, through like video chat. So that wasn't that much of a difference because I was already abroad. But yeah, I don't know. I think I hate to say it, but I think it started kind of like a dark phase of my life after that for a while, where I was just trying to figure out, it was like a crisis of sorts in my life, where everything I knew I had to like suddenly let go of and start again. And so it wasn't pleasant, So for the first, I know, 4 or 5 months, I was just trying to do what I could, find whatever work I could find, and just stay, as busy as I could. I remember going to my cousin's place, and, them allowing me to like come hang out with their, 1-year-old son at the time. So that's kind of how I really spent my my time. And I mean, I already mentioned some of the challenges, and yeah, and
Yeah.
then towards the end of the 6 months, I remember starting grad school, and I was going to be in Boston for grad school, but turned out that it was all online. So didn't really help my social life there either. And
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
you saying like that was like you were even debating whether you still even wanted to go to grad school because that's kind of a big part of it. Um, but you ended up doing it online, right?
yeah. I mean, I may have mentioned this before, but I'm more of an introvert. I may not seem like it all the time, but just getting out and like, socializing and stuff like that, it takes some effort. It's, and I want to do that because it gets me out of my bubble that I'm in all the time, right? But when the pandemic hit, it was just like, nope, you have to stay in your bubble, or, you can call someone, you can talk to them, but it's just, it was disappointing. It was like disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, not in another person or whatever per se, but more so in situations that were happening. And it was just, I think looking back, I realized that was life trying to, in some way, reorient me to a different direction. And I was, I was resisting, so it made it more painful than it had to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a big adjustment for sure. Because I know, you got pulled out of another country, came back here early, but then all the things that you enjoyed about being at home, you couldn't really go and enjoy because we're sort of locked down and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was grateful that I had somewhere to come back to. I was grateful that my family, welcomed me with open arms, even though they'd seen me just 6 months prior to that, because I came and visited in 2019 for a little bit. Um, I think I just realized that, yeah, I have things to be grateful for. That took a while. That took a long time, but yeah, I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But
Yeah. Nice. Well, um, I mean, I think, we kind of touched on it a little bit to get further into it, technology became a big factor during the pandemic and from a variety of ways. And trying to use it to, keep in touch with folks, either now working remotely, that sort of thing. Wanted to talk a little about our experience with technology during the pandemic. I mean, one big thing was at least between the two of us, we would always try and keep in touch, and either talk, or we even did a couple Zoom sessions with some friends of ours playing Jackbox party games and other things like that periodically to like try and connect as well,
I remember
and get into Fortnite as well.
yeah, that's right. And I remember attending a couple of virtual birthday get-togethers, or like sing-alongs. I don't know, like where you get together and you sing happy birthday to someone. I don't know what that's called, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I remember a couple of those. Um, I remember just once I started grad school, I remember just tons and tons of Zoom sessions or phone calls, and uh, people were always saying, oh, you're really good at using technology to keep in touch with people. And I'm like, I'm miserable. Like secretly I'm like, I'm miserable, this is torture. But like, like, I don't know, I never wanted to be that introverted ever. Like I wanted to be able to get out of the house. Another thing I really got into was like walking around my neighborhood, and apparently so did everyone else. So
Yeah.
yeah. What else? I'm trying to think. What else did we
Yeah.
do
I mean,
technology
definitely keep in
wise?
touch. Like I said, I think the one fun thing for me was the Fortnite, just because I had loved that game and been playing it for so long, and I got you and I got a bunch of other friends into it, who to this day still play, and like so that was kind of a fun thing to just sort of talk about and play throughout the pandemic. So that was fun as well, since that was just one way to do something remotely.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned Fortnite too, because through all the like I said before, I was going through more challenges than not. And even now, like I'm still like, there are days when you want to fall back into that, but you have to be like, nah, this, this is not a healthy place to be. Um, but yeah, like things like Fortnite, I never played Fortnite before. I think I'd come back. So I'm glad you got me into that. Yeah, I mean, I just have like a PC and it's not, the best in terms of like graphics and whatnot, but it always helped me to like take my mind off things for a little bit and just do something else.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, no, I think like I don't know. It seems so weird to think about back then, but now it just seems so normal our use of technology in this case. Like I have a setup at work, like my remote work is, they sent me a PC and another monitor, and I have another monitor I already had. So I have like a 3 monitor setup for work and everything. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's just my normal, you know, thing. And I can connect so seamlessly now, no problem. And so that's interesting to kind of think about, because that, before when I was working in person as well, I had a laptop they gave that honestly wasn't great and was very slow, but at least our company was very quick to adopt like technology and get it out there for folks to start using. And not directly for me, but it was interesting also because I tendentially kind of saw this, is folks starting to use like telemedicine for their appointments. And that was a big trend. I mean, we started to like look at that data in our work as well, but
I'm not
that
gonna
was a
lie.
huge adjustment.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I mean, it's okay. It's okay. Because I've actually, since then, a lot of providers actually, yeah, where you work, that's, I use that one of their branches, like primary care
Mm-hmm.
branches and whatnot. And a lot of their providers are now like 3 days remote and like 2 days in the office. And it's great because it's quick, but beyond that, it's so annoying because it's like, oh, you got to get lab tests done. Well, you got to go in for that. You got to get this done. So it's like it's a hassle. Whereas before it was just like all like you go in and you do it all and that's it. To me,
Yeah,
but
no, I get that for sure, and I know there was a lot of like weird stuff to work out in terms of you log in, but then you're emailed a link, and then you click on it, and then you wait for like it wasn't super intuitive at first, and sometimes still can be a challenge. Um, but it was interesting just kind of seeing, even from like a regulation standpoint, folks like trying to catch up to, even allowing, like Zoom is not necessarily like HIPAA compliant, but there were a lot of waivers to even allow that. Um, just for a while, just because like people needed to see their doctors. So it's just interesting to see how technology almost in some ways accelerated um, because of the pandemic in a way that we're not going to go back on now. Like this is something that will just be adopted in a certain way going forward.
I
um,
always the last thought about this, and then we can move on.
yeah.
What I always think about is this is like one of the big steps into like the space age, right? Because think about it, when people are like out going out in outer space, like, or going at like, traveling at fast speeds on maybe a hyperloop or something, right? How are they going to be communicating with each other? Like I don't know. I think it's both fascinating and interesting that like that's where we're headed, that's slowly becoming a reality, but it's also really scary because I don't know if you've ever heard anybody say everything that's on the internet stays on the internet, can be monitored and whatever. So that's a massive concern, that everything that's on the internet, you know, there's maybe a backdoor or some, privacy issue or something. So
Yeah. Yeah, for better or for worse, we are moving forward in that direction faster because of this pandemic. So what are the implications of that? That's something we'll have to kind of deal with, I guess, in the coming years, really. I mean,
yeah.
for sure.
Let's see. I know we talked about that one for a while. Adjusting. The next thing that I have on my list is adjusting to how we socialize during the pandemic, and I think we touched on that a little bit in terms of technology, but I think people's comforts level changed, right? So I wanted to kind of touch on that just briefly and how we made social decisions. You know, that changed. Whether people are married or single, I think people made different decisions based on that. Whether people have kids or older family members, you know, all of that stuff. And also, since we're talking about social stuff, just dating during the pandemic and how much how much of a pain it's been, to be honest, or it was more of a pain. It's getting a little bit easier now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I
Any
mean,
thoughts?
definitely people had different comfort levels. I mean, you take it even from those that like they would go out and they would wear like two or three masks and gloves and almost like a full bodysuit, right? They'd spray down every package that comes in and stuff, which I don't want to like knock on anyone for it. If that's what made them comfortable, like that's, it is what it is. But you have those extremes, and then you have the folks that, would just go out without a mask and protest and that sort of thing. So you kind of have like a whole range of people, different comfort levels, which is
Meanwhile,
interesting.
meanwhile, in developing countries, they were like, "Mask? What mask? This is my chin guard." Like, and they're like
Yeah.
going into the cafes and like, "Oh, Chikemi, what are you doing? How's it going?" That's
Yeah.
that's what I saw anytime I'd call my host family or people like around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting like how that certainly varies. I guess it's just like, and it's interesting to see how that comfort level would change over time. Like, for us it was like we have our central bubble, right, of folks, our immediate family, but are still kind of, immediate, but like for example, like my sister and her family or my grandparents, like they wouldn't go see anyone else. So when they would come over, at first they would still wear masks and it would still kind of like distance a little, and then as time went on, you start to get more comfortable, at least with that group of people, since you're in that sort of bubble, and then the masks start to come off. I think it was tricky because like for my grandparents, like they can't just go get groceries for themselves. So we had to go to their house and drop things off and like help them with some things, take them to a doctor's appointment if there was one, or do something remotely or whatever. So trying to like manage that in a way that, we were comfortable with and they were also comfortable with. And so dealing with things like that was always tricky, because it's one of those things that you just like you never know, right? So it's like trying to,
I,
come up with your best comfort level as far as like what works health wise.
but I feel like to some degree, and again, I don't want to go too deep into this, but to some degree, the fear of COVID has been making people anxious more than like some people barely have any symptoms when they get COVID, and others have tons of symptoms. So for some people it's just like, oh my god, it's everywhere. Like it's, so that's that's kind of sucks. And I mean, initially that's how I was too, but we're social beings at the end of the day. And yeah, you can mask up 20 times or whatever, but at the end of the day, you're going to be like, you know, I need to see people. I need to see some sort of person to stay sane, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it comes down to, like you said, different comfort levels that people have, right? And so some folks wanted to find ways to do that and socialize in a way that was, good for all parties and safe and all that. And
mhm.
some folks felt more comfortable, kind of being at home with two masks on, even at home or whatever. It certainly varied in that regard. I
Yeah.
do want to real quick read in the chat. Joel is in the chat. He's like, "What's up, guys? It's a little late to this one. I'll rewatch it all once it's finished. I'll stick around for the remainder of it." Thanks, Joel, for stopping
Hey,
by.
Joel.
And Munib says it's very scary, or was very scary with older people.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I
I
think that's
agree.
definitely a factor for sure.
Yeah, I think that was, I know I'm like, I was making jokes and stuff earlier, but that's probably one age group that I was like also most concerned about. Like my parents, my grandparents, they're all in their 60s and 80s and 90s. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's first thing was
absolutely.
people making it into a political issue. Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the way the cookie crumbles, everybody's got an opinion about it. So that's why, like, that's one thing we just don't even touch upon, because we're like, regardless of what we say, somebody's going to get upset, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. So, you mentioned like dating during the pandemic. Do you want to touch on that at all, or that experience?
yeah. Well, let's see. I didn't really start dating anyone until like January of this year. So it was kind of like, later on in the like 9, 10 months on into the pandemic. Um, I think it was like the second semester of graduate school, and you've already met everyone. Everybody already, like, some people are in person, some people are not. So, everybody already has, like, the novelty is worn off, and so it was just like, not just for me, but like for everyone, right? So it was like, okay, well, I things were starting to open back up a little bit, and some people felt okay, like meeting up outdoors, as long as we like stayed 6 feet apart and wore masks. So yeah, I was just like, I was like, I have to rebuild my life somehow, because as I mentioned before, I left everything in a way that I built. I left that behind, and I had to come back and rebuild everything. So I was eager to get started at some point. And the challenge was the vaccine at that time, it just came out, and efficacy was high, but long-term side effects were unknown, and there were tons of unknowns. So at that time, I was not vaccinated, and anytime you like chat with someone online, the question became, are you vaccinated? And it's like, no, and then ghost right there. Like, that was the end of the conversation. Or it was like, oh yeah, well, sorry. Some people were nicer about it, and they were like, okay, sorry, I can't meet up with you, because of this, that, and the other. Whereas some other people I met a lot of outgoing women who, the more outgoing they were, it seems, the less concerned they were whether I was vaccinated or not. That's what it felt like. But again, that's an overgeneralization, and I know that. So that was kind of challenging at times. But yeah, I think it added an extra layer of complexity to dating that definitely wasn't there before, I think, at least for a short period of time. And I think since then, now pretty much everyone's vaccinated, more or less, at least, one dose or something. And if they're not, then that's fine. That's their choice. But yeah, so it's getting less and less complicated now, because people have more certainty in terms of where they stand, or, it does get political, as Manib was saying, because, somebody on a dating website might be like, oh, you're not vaccinated? Well, I don't believe in that. I don't even want to see you. So it's like, okay, well, that kind of thing. So
Gotcha.
Joel said, I caught COVID after being fully vaccinated. I only got mild cold symptoms. Then again, I received the interesting, monoclonal antibody treatment, which is meant to significantly reduce symptoms and duration. Yeah, I've heard or read a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I remember, Joel, you were telling me about it when you had it, and kind of the symptoms that you had, and um and I'm glad that it ended up only kind of being mild in the end, and you got through it. But it's not fun. I mean, I can't personally share that experience, but I do know someone that also got it, which we'll talk about later as well. But
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, I always tested negative, but I think I had some symptoms at a couple points throughout the pandemic early on.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get to that, like you said, in a little bit. I want to ask you if actually anybody in the chat, anybody watching, and you, Hassan, obviously, if you picked up any interesting hobbies during the pandemic.
I was thinking about that as well, and I can't think of any specific hobbies that I picked up. I know for some people it was like now that they're home, they have the time to kind of learn and pick up on other things. For me, it was now that I'm home, I have more time to spend with my son and stuff now. So that like that, the hobby part of it is, me really becoming a father and kind of like embracing that full on. So that, I mean, that was really that I still kept up with all the things that I did before in terms of YouTube to some extent, or other podcasts I've done, or other different things like that. But I can't think of any other specific hobbies that I had picked up. What about you? Did you pick up any hobbies?
uh I think yeah, before I answer that, I will say, I mean, hanging out with your son, having that bonding time, that's always a plus, I'm sure. So
Oh yeah.
uh, and your son is adorable. So except when he's bossy and pointing at things and telling you to do stuff for him, which is always
Yep.
funny.
Which is more and more every day.
It's hilarious. Um, yeah, I'm trying to remember, what did I do? So I remember you got me into Fortnite a little bit. Um, my hobby was grad school, man. Like, I was paying for everything out of pocket. I didn't want to go into any debt. And I wanted to just do well because I'd never been this like avid student before. Though over the years my grades have improved and whatnot. But I wanted to like do as well as I could, and sure enough, at the end of my program, I got straight A's for first time in my life ever, which has never happened.
That is awesome, man. Just congrats again on that. That's super super cool.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I got plenty of C's, D's, and one F in undergrad and in high school and everything, and yeah, so things have turned around a little bit in terms of education for me. Um, that was one big hobby. I remember I remember trying to like learn to cut my own hair, which didn't end so well. That wasn't a hobby. That was just more kind of a mishap. Because it
Mm-hmm.
was just getting longer and longer, and you're like, I'm just gonna buy a freaking razor and just go for it. And it's like,
Yeah.
Ma, you gotta fix this. I screwed up. Like,
Yeah, I mean
yeah,
that's like speaking of that was like a big challenge I think a lot of people had was like, how do I get a haircut? What do I do? Like trying to figure that out. Like I remember I got my dad to like try and cut my hair, but he would always be too afraid of like cutting too much, so I would never be like satisfied with it. Be like, come on, just go for it, go. He's like,
yeah,
it's fine, it's fine. It's not like I'm going anywhere or whatever. But
yeah.
so that was, and then also I think like in the pandemic, at least for me, it was like let me try growing out a beard and see what I think. And I ended up kind of liking it and have kind of stuck with that sort of look. So that was I guess in one way trying new things, I guess during the pandemic in that way.
I think
Tried out a new look
I
and
think the pandemic really was like a like a much longer version of No Shave November
yeah.
for like every dude, pretty much, right? Like I know so many people who never had beards ever before, and they're like, you see them, and they're like, "Who the heck are you?" Oh, yeah, I know you. Like, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So that
I
was
thought it was
interesting.
kind of funny the other day because I was showing a picture, like going through old photos with my son Idris, and I was showing pictures of me like pre-pandemic, and I realized he kept looking at me in kind of the pictures like kind of weird because he didn't like he was like, "Is that you?" Because he hasn't seen me without a beard. And I didn't even think about that for a while. I was like, "Oh yeah, like I just started the beard
Oh,
at that time, so he hasn't
dude,
actually seen me without it."
you should totally one day when you're ready
One
to
day,
get
just
rid of the
shave it
beard.
off and get his reaction or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's tons of videos out there like
Yeah,
that.
once he's a few years like a little older or whatever, I think that would be funny or something.
I'm
But
sure even now he'd pick up on it and be like, "You don't have get away from
let's
me.
just
I don't
start
know you."
crying. Yeah, he won't come
Yeah.
to me anymore. Yeah.
Um, but uh, I think I also I've wanted to start learning Spanish for a while, so I bought like some audio discs and started listening to Spanish Pimsleur audio discs and learning a little bit here and there. That's been another thing. Trying to think what else. You know what I do want to get into? I know this is off topic, but what I do want to get into is DJing. Like I really want to learn how to DJ. That'd be so much fun.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds
So
cool.
yeah, maybe
Uh,
I'll pick that up in the next pandemic.
I mean,
I'm
this
kidding.
one's still ongoing, so like.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Bad joke.
Manib in the chat says got into Gundams and sneakers. Nice. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
What? Okay, not to sound like a totally zoned out. What can you tell me what Gundams are?
Oh, so Gundams, they're a type of like a these robots, whatever. It's a thing out of Japan.
Yes,
So I think
yes.
people they're almost like model kits that you can build and then paint and yeah. There's some
Okay.
pretty intricate ones, like and pretty, large ones. I've never gotten one, but I've seen them and they look pretty sweet.
Speaking of that, I also got into puzzles, like just, putting together puzzles and just killing time.
Yeah. I did a bunch of Legos actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I did also film it for my YouTube channel, but that was kind of a fun thing to do too. But yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so we kind of talked a little bit about some unexpected challenges as well in terms of like haircuts and things like that. But were there any other challenges that you went through? I mean, obviously, like, in terms of having to plan or go to any events, those things would be remotely. So like for me, it was we had a baby shower at one point and we were trying to figure out like what do we do for that, and we ended up doing one with a small group of people kind of outside our house, and you remember you came uh
Yeah.
to that as well. And so that was one of the first times in during that whole pandemic that we actually saw some people face to face, but we were all like social distancing, wearing masks and stuff. So it was kind of nice to have an event like that where you could actually see some people, um but still try and be safe. I don't know if you had any other experiences or unexpected challenges with anything.
I think I already mentioned some. So the birthdays that I mentioned earlier, the only other thing was like a wedding that, kind of came out of the blue. But it was back in December and it was just hard to make that call because, it's a close relative of mine and it was hard. It was just like one of those situations, vaccines aren't fully like out yet. And they're talking about like a socially distant like wedding, and it was, they said it was going to be small, but even then, like, you don't want to be.
Small for our culture, for those that don't know,
Yeah.
is much larger than most weddings, even
It's
still,
like
probably.
400 divided by 4.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's not small. Oh yes, it is. um yeah. So that was a challenging decision, on a family level to make, for my family, because basically we had to say, it's tough versus, in our culture, I'm not sure how your family handles this, but like in our culture, if it's close family, you should probably show up. If you don't want to like, if you don't want there to be like rifts or problems and whatever, you should be there for family, right? But that was hard to navigate around that because of everything that was happening in the world. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Lots of interesting challenges.
yeah. Joel said something about earlier. Hopefully, there isn't another pandemic anytime soon. I hope not either. That was just a terrible joke, which I hope doesn't come true. Um, yeah, you said you got into TikTok. I got pretty hooked to YouTube for a while. I still haven't checked out TikTok, but that's because you know, social media, man. It's just so easy to get hooked onto it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joel, on the TikTok thing, but that's more in the last couple months, I'd say. But yeah, even with YouTube as well too, going down the rabbit holes there of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's see. The next thing that I wanted to ask you about is what were some of the what were some of like your was this about like e-learning or e-teaching? I'm not quite sure what this is referring to.
Yeah, so I think teaching during the pandemic. So I think like um, this topic was going to be sort of my perspective of me teaching the class I had and how that went during the pandemic, and then from your perspective of going through learning, through an environment, which I know you kind of touched on a little bit as well. But if
Yeah.
there's anything else to add, but like for me, like I said, it was a very quick transition, and I had like about 2 class sessions, 1 week of class, and then we went like virtual after that. So I, it was funny because I taught initially the prior year, and I had created all my class materials, everything, and I planned to kind of take that, make a few changes, but kind of use that now that I have the curriculum built this year. And then a week into it, having to like completely adjust everything again because of it being online. So that was a good amount of work to do, because then I was also figuring out the best way to host our class sessions online, be able to, like oftentimes I'd show certain videos and things and making sure technology wise that would work. Um, and creating the exams on like Blackboard, instead of administering them in person. And so trying to set up the software to, make sure that like folks aren't, like opening up other web browsers and things. Blackboard has a way of kind of, doing that to like stop cheating, that sort of thing. So like kind of like going through and like setting up all that stuff um, was an interesting challenge to do. And I remember even like early on, because that was kind of earlier in the pandemic when like technology, like the internet was a little spotty sometimes and would every now and then disconnect. So I remember I'd be teaching and every now and then I would disconnect and it'd take me like a minute or so to reconnect. And so my students are just kind of like waiting or wondering what's going on. Every now and then they'd like start sharing the screen and start like drawing random things or whatever, like just to like kind of, like take over and just be silly or whatever during that time. But I was always like, oh God, please don't disconnect right now. Like, how am I going to manage this? So trying to like, work through the technical stuff. But overall, I think it actually worked out pretty well just because I was already using a lot of those tools like Blackboard and stuff already. So it was more just finding a way to make sure that I could get people engaged. The one thing I will say that was a challenge was getting folks to turn on their cameras during the class. I would encourage it and try and get people to, do that and do that, but like most of them didn't. So it was hard to gauge. People would post in the chat, thankfully, every now and then, so I could get some feedback, but it's really hard as a lecturer to get that kind of feedback because in person, you can see it. You can see if people are like falling asleep, if you got to adjust or do something. But online, man, that was a bit of a tough challenge to be able to kind of read the room and see how things were going.
I remember being that oddball who would they would say, okay, turn on our cameras, and I'd always do it. I'm like, I want to meet people, I want to connect. Like I was just so like ready to connect with anybody, even if they were like halfway around the world or wherever, because our program was a global like thing. And yeah, sure enough, it worked. I did connect with some people, even though I'm only in touch with like one or two of them now, but yeah. And then I went to actually Boston to see some of them in 2020, got like tested and all that. Just, I said, I haven't been anywhere in such a long time. I'm going to do this. So got together with another friend from university who lives in the DC metro area and went up. But the only other thing I want to add is I felt annoyed because as freeing as technology is supposed to be, it felt more and more restrictive than ever before. I mean, it is in some ways freeing because you can communicate with people anywhere from the world. You can do things from anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection. But then you were talking about how Blackboard and all these softwares, they have restrictions that they can put into place, which, okay, yeah, for fairness sakes makes sense or whatever. But as a student, being on that receiving end of all of that is just like, what? Like, what?
Yeah, I
So
mean, I get that. To be fair, it's like for that was just for exams because in person, I mean, you don't have any additional resources anyways, so it was kind of, online can't really monitor that sort of thing. But
yeah,
um,
like
but
my
yeah, I mean,
my sister, she's taking her boards exam tomorrow, and she's doing it remotely. And she was telling me about like there's literally a web page on like the where the I don't know what it's called, like the proctoring place that proctors
mhm.
the exam. There's literally like you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that, you have to like show us your entire room, you have to turn off all of the
Oh yeah,
electronic
I feel like I
devices.
did that
You
for
gotta
some certification or something at one point, and I remember having to like have my laptop and kind of make sure the room was clear. So I remember the challenge is like my office, like they're like don't have any other like items around you. If you've
yeah,
you've seen my
it's
office, it's packed with stuff. I was like, where do I even go? So I had to use like my
yeah,
sister's desk, and so in that regard, yeah. But I didn't go
yeah.
to that extreme as a professor.
No,
There was
I
no
know.
camera involved. Yeah, yeah.
I'm just saying it's like,
But I get how that
you
is quite,
know,
it can be challenging to people who are in different situations where they might not have access to that type of environment to, you know,
yeah.
to do that. And that
Fortunately,
adds an extra stressor.
yeah, and fortunately for me, Brandeis, I went to Brandeis University, and they're very liberal, right? And they were open to like trying out new things. This was the first time that they had ever done this program online. So fortunately, I would say like not 80 to 90% of my professors were very lenient. They maybe instead of tests, they would do papers, or maybe instead of, if they still decided to have tests, they would do it in a different way, or maybe they would give you, extra tries, or maybe they would allow you like one cheat sheet or something. I don't know, just getting creative. And I personally felt a weight lifted off with professors like that, because if you're putting the effort in to prepare for it, or create like a cheat sheet that has like one page that you can write or something like that, you don't even need it by the time you finish like studying all that most of the time. At least that's been my experience. So yeah, I don't know. In some ways the pressure was greater, and in some ways it was less. So um
Gotcha. So Joel in the chat says, "What's your guys' thoughts on the new Omicron variant? I feel like it's never going to end." I mean, I'll just say this on that. It's like it's one of those things where there's always there's a Delta variant, this variant, that variant. This is a new thing. We just don't have too much info on it. Honestly, I'd prefer to not think too hard on it and just keep doing what we're doing, keep taking the necessary precautions or whatever's needed. Once there's more information, then react appropriately. But at this point, there's no point in stressing too much over something that we just don't, like until there's a reason to is kind of right. I mean, I kind of prefer to just focus on what is in front of us, I guess.
one of my coworkers was like, that we were all like trying to figure out how to pronounce it properly, and he's like, yeah, I call it Omarion. I'm like, yeah, and then it stuck with me for some reason.
Everyone's
So.
always like, this is like the Transformer variant or whatever, because it sounds like Unicron or like some other Transformer name or something.
I mean,
It
it's a
almost sounds like
Greek.
this Omnimon is a Digimon or something. So it's like
Isn't
it's fun.
isn't it the Greek alphabet, like the alpha, beta, whatever, theta, and
Oh,
it's one of those, I think. Greek, not
that would
alphabet,
make
but Greek
sense.
thing or whatever.
That would make sense. I've never heard of that. I guess I've never gone that far down that alphabet. But yeah, I mean that would make sense.
I bet you
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look it up real quick. But
yeah,
obviously, yeah, Omicron is the 15th letter of the Greek alphabet. So
gotcha. There you
yeah,
go.
um,
So
but
one of the other things that I did want to touch on was my experience of finding out I was going to be a father and then becoming a father and all that during this pandemic as well. Which was interesting because early on, so when we found out we were going to have a baby and kind of through those few months and stuff, like most of the people that we told we had to tell remotely, which was interesting. Would have been nice to tell a lot more people in person, but obviously we couldn't. I remember just randomly dropping it on you one day. I think we were talking. You're like, "Oh, what's new?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, nothing much. I at work today. I'm gonna be a father. I'm gonna like I just kind of like randomly said that. That's
Oh,
funny.
dude, you remember that time when you were like, you have one guess
Yes.
to
Okay. Yeah.
get
Yeah. So that
that's
was
a
the other
great
thing. So
story.
we also again there's certain information we're
You
telling
gotta
people and
share
all that.
that. You gotta
So
share that. And
I
you're never gonna believe how this ends too. This is really good.
yeah. So I told Udit that he had did I say one guess or I said one, right? Yeah, yeah, one guess. Um, because he's like, tell me the name. We're like, we're not telling anyone the name.
Well, this
Like
was
that's
before.
until the
This was
baby's born.
before. Yeah, this was before he was born, and you were
Right.
like,
Yeah. We said we're not telling anyone the name or anything, and you
well,
kept saying, "Come
but
on, tell me, man." Like
no,
it's
but
like,
you kept saying, "Oh yeah, we figured out the name," and I'm like, "Well, then you got to tell me. Like, you got to tell
yeah.
me. Like, I know you
So
for
so I was
years."
like, yeah, yeah. So I was like, all right, fine, whatever. If you can guess the name, just take one random guess. I'll tell you if you're right or not. And you're like, oh, that's not fair. Like, there's like so many names out there, all this stuff. And you're like, give me a hint, give me a hint. I said, I'm not giving you anything. And weeks went by or whatever. And I kept telling you, I was like, if you want to make your guess, because then once
It's
the
getting
baby's
late.
here, we're
He's
telling
coming
everyone,
soon.
you
Yeah.
know? And then I think at the very end, I think I agreed to one hint, right? And I said, you know what? Okay, fine. I'll tell
One
you
alphabet, just the
first
alphabet.
letter, the
Yeah,
first letter of the name is
yeah,
I.
letter.
And I think in general, I did say it's the reason we picked the name is it had something to do with, kind of our faith and kind of, that sort of thing. But the letter I is what I said. And
Can I finish this off?
yeah.
Because I was just like, it gets me so excited. And I remember, so it was like the last few days of the guessing game, right? You were like, it's like now or never. Basically, I procrastinated till the last moment, right? And I remember, okay, I was like, okay. And before that, I'd made tons of jokes about, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but nothing serious. I'd never guessed anything serious. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make one serious guess. And I go online and I look up, like, since you told me that was from your faith, I looked up names that start with I, and there's this like long list of, like 10, 20 pages of names. And I start going through them, and I pick one that I really liked. And it was because, I don't know if anybody, well, I'm sure people know of Idris Elba, the actor. He's like a British actor, I think, or
I think so.
right? Yeah. And I think he's a pretty good actor, and he's like a buff looking dude. He plays like a lot of different types of characters and stuff. And that was the name that I picked. And guess what? That was the name he was gonna give his baby. So it was just wild. I was like, what are the freaking odds? Like, this is why we're supposed to be friends. Like, I don't know. It was just like
Yeah.
one of those moments. Like,
I remember you said it and I was like, yes. Like, okay, you got it.
yeah, you were like, you were totally freaked out. It seemed like you were just like, what the
because
heck?
also like it's not like a common name for us either, and it's like, and it's one like when I told my family and we're kind of giving them guesses, starts with I, all that, they went with like Ismail and all sorts of other I names and other things, whatever, but it took a while for somebody to guess Idris. So it's funny that for you it was because the actor name that it kind of stuck out and you're like, this is, I think I like it, and there it was.
Well,
So it just
I'm
shows
guessing,
like how we kind of like think on that same wavelength, sometimes.
when you say somebody, I thought I was the only one who got it right?
Oh, like, well, I mean, what I told my like immediate family, we told them
Right.
the name ahead of time, and so we let them guess, and then we told them. So like it took them like 5-10 tries or whatever. But yeah, somebody like my brother-in-law did guess the name after a little while.
Okay,
We gave them
okay.
like a few hints and
Well,
stuff.
you
Yeah,
gave me one try, so
yeah,
my
right. No,
odds
so
of
yours was like right away. Yeah, yeah,
my odds
yeah.
of getting it right were like slim to none. Basically, probability was extremely low, and oh my gosh, I was very excited, and I was like, this is why we're meant to know each other.
Yeah, for sure, for
So,
sure. So
um,
that was a fun little thing. But yeah, basically, so um, it was interesting. Expecting during the pandemic because, for example, like doctor's appointments and things, I couldn't actually go in. So I've had this like thought, my whole life, whatever, like like once, if my wife or whatever is pregnant, I'd go to the doctors with her. I'd like hear the baby's heartbeat and kind of be involved in all that. And I couldn't. And that really sucked. Like I actually took off anytime she had an appointment, even still, and I drove her to the appointment. I would sit in the car outside waiting, and we would try and FaceTime, but half the time the connection would be so bad, it'd be breaking in and out. So there were some moments where I got to see a little bit what was going on, some moments where I couldn't, and so that really like sucked to try and have like that experience. But in the grand scheme of things, I was just happy that things were going well and the baby was healthy and Maheen was healthy. And then in the summer of that, the first year of the pandemic, Maheen actually got COVID. And so that at the time, because it was only a few months into it, there wasn't as much information out there. So it was a little scary to like wonder like what are the implications, and now it's even known that pregnant women do have a higher risk of complications and a lot of challenges if they do have COVID. So luckily, thankfully, Maheen had very mild symptoms, and she was fine. She was healthy. Baby was healthy. No issues from that. So I'm super thankful for that. But that was scary because I remember she knew she was exposed to someone that had COVID, immediately quarantined, got tested, she was positive. So it was like trying to deal with, like that uncertainty for a while, which was challenging. But thankfully that all worked out. But yeah, then even going to the hospital, having the baby, all that, like nobody else could come. It was just she could have one other person with her, so I was there with her. And so like a lot of those restrictions and things were a little challenging, but in some ways, in that regard, I think that was actually kind of nice to just have like the two of us there for that. And I kind of actually um uh liked how that part, sort of turned out. But yeah, and then becoming a father and going through that, I've talked about that in prior episodes. But
Good for you for taking initiative, man, because I know I know some people that, or some guys that are just like, oh, I can't go or whatever. Like, so, good for you, man. Yeah. And I know it's also like, your first baby and all of that. You want to make sure everything's good and do your part. So
yeah, no, that
good
was
for you.
something I wanted to make sure. And I took my full paternity leave. We had 6 weeks or whatever, and I was like stressing at first, like, can I do it? Can I not? Is it going to be too much with my team and kind of working remote? I was like, I mean, I'm here at my computer. I could log in, but at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take the time and do that. I took the 6 weeks, and um, very happy with that decision.
Sounds like
So
sounds like you went through truly the whole parental anxiety that a lot of people talk about, right? Like, oh my God, all these decisions. I don't know. Do I not? Oh my God, how's this gonna affect the baby? All of that kind of stuff. So
oh yeah,
yeah.
oh yeah.
Well,
But yeah, that was interesting times. And now here we are 1 year later.
yeah. Yeah. So before we continue on, I wanted to ask, what do you think? I know we have a couple other, like 3 or 4 more things that we could talk about if you want, but I know we're over the hour limit a little bit. All right, do you want to keep going for a bit or?
I mean, I think the next few things, why don't we just sort of like package this together in a way, or like if you have any thoughts on these, do you want to like if there's anything specific from the next few topics that you want to highlight? Um, or,
Um, I think some of it we touched on briefly earlier, but
yeah,
I know I mentioned, some of the challenges that I went through. I think being a single guy, like loneliness can sometimes get the best of you, and having lived in Albania before the pandemic, and I was living by myself in an apartment, and I had friends and host family nearby and whatnot, but there were times in the winter, because I was just coming out of winter at that point, and I lived in the mountains. Winter was long there. It was like 7-8 months long. um, so I was already kind of like feeling like the sense of like isolation, because a lot of people stay in during the winter. It's snowing, sometimes the weather's really rough or whatever. So yeah, I think that was a challenge, coming up from that long winter, coming home. And initially, yeah, everybody's excited to see you for a couple of weeks and whatever. And then, once the novelty wears off, then it's like, oh well, here we go again, one long winter. So um yeah, I think in some ways I'm still emerging out of that winter. But I think I've made a lot of progress in the past 2 years. And I think like, have you ever heard of reverse culture shock?
Uh, I don't think so.
So like when you go into a different country from the States, say for example, there's
Yeah.
culture shock, right? Like you have to adjust to a culture. It can take you 6 months, sometimes a year, whatever, and there's ups and downs. And they taught us about that whole cycle. There's something called reverse culture shock, where once you're fully acclimated to a different culture and you have to come back home and the rules don't apply anymore, the rules that you're used to, being overly like, other countries, at least Albania, values community more than they do, family and community. They value a lot more than we do here. We're a little bit more individualistic here. So that was a reverse culture shock, and that caused feelings of loneliness. That caused, adjustments that I think I am on the very like far end of. Like I said, when it comes to these kinds of things, they take, for me in my life, they take a long time to process. So I'm on the far end of it now, and just emerging out of it fully. So
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I think, on sort of the flip side a little bit of like, um, in an environment where, like I'm at home with my wife, my parents, my sister, and everybody, like, a whole group of folks that you're kind of now even you're with even more now during this pandemic, trying to sometimes like get the breathing room that you need a little bit because you're not being able to go out and go do things, was sometimes a challenge, especially just after either a day of dealing with a cranky baby, or all sorts of other things, or like a stressful day at work or whatever. um it's not like you could always just go out somewhere and do something. So um for me, one of the things that helped sometimes was, at night once things are done, either Maheen or I would kind of take turns handling, the baby or something, or one of us could just kind of just decompress and relax a bit, and either play some Fortnite or just chill and watch a movie or something. And kind of, the nice thing is, we have like a little entertainment area or my office down in the basement, so I can at least kind of get away for a bit and have that breathing room a little bit. So even though, like for example, when I work, I did feel like I had that separation, right? Like, some people find that in the remote work life, you feel like you're kind of trapped because you're
Mhm.
working and you're living all in the same place. So for me, because I had one room and a dedicated workspace, like when I'm done with work or anything like that, I can kind of separate those things, and step away. And I think that was something important to do. That's why I also specifically requested desktops at work rather than a laptop, so that way I knew it'd be in a stationary environment as well. And so I think, like, for folks to try and, that were maybe feeling trapped or needed breathing room, that was definitely an adjustment, during the pandemic, trying to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't I I don't know. I was after all I'm gonna say is, and I know I don't want to like drag this on, but all I'm gonna say is I was part of me was glad I was home and I felt like safe again. Because in Albania, I'm in a foreign culture. I constantly have to, and I was representing a different organization. I constantly had to like be on point or present myself a certain way. So I don't know, having that pressure off, but then just missing it. It's like the most double-edged sword of double-edged swords, that felt like,
Mhm.
for the longest time. So yeah. And yeah, I think, I'm still here in Alexandria. Like I said, I'm on the far end of finishing up this chapter of my life. And I think in 2022, I'd like to, move back out and go back out into the world and do my own thing again. I don't know in what sense. I'm trying to figure that out, but I think that's what's on the radar for me.
Yeah.
Besides that, one final thing that we can mention, and then let's wrap it up. And also, let's hear it from Joel and Munib if they have anything else to say. But the last thing I wanted to mention was values, focus, and goals. Like how your values, focus, and goals changed throughout the pandemic, and what fears and anxieties that brought up for you, if any.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, I don't know that the pandemic directly changed things, but just some of the other life experiences of one being a father, and then also like at work, becoming a manager of a team. In a way, I guess the pandemic affected those things of like at work, for example, I'm not there in person to be able to like communicate things and handle things. So trying to manage how I would be able to handle things remotely in a way that, is engaging to the team and effective and that sort of thing, and make sure that they're heard through that process. So like it was trying to learn and grow in that regard. And so that was kind of my focus during the pandemic, is utilizing the time that I had to, take advantage of the remote tools that we have, or kind of,
Well,
keeping in touch with people in that way.
but in one sense, from what I can gather, in terms of your values or your focus or goals, they did change pretty drastically when you had the baby, right? Like,
Right.
so
Yeah. I mean, so it did. I was just saying, like, in terms of, I don't know that the pandemic necessarily,
right.
like, made that change, but yes, I mean, obviously becoming a father, I mean, that is like the
Well,
biggest change in my life. And,
you decided to become a
uh,
parent during the pandemic, so to some degree, I mean, I don't know if you like, I don't know, I don't know
yeah,
what
we kind of decided a bit
right.
before, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, that's why I was like, I don't want to assume. My bad.
Yeah. No worries. But I mean, I think the pandemic, in a way, like it gave us more time with with our son, and for me in particular, being able to remote work, that was huge, because that take away all the commutes, all that take away, like during the day, if I need to go up and check on him, do anything, like I feel like I do have a much stronger bond and connection with him because of, the environment that the pandemic kind of produced in a way. So I guess that's one sort of positive that came out of it. It's definitely an interesting new world for him to be brought up in that regard for him, and we'll see how that impacts him in the coming years. But at least from my perspective, like I feel like I've been able to be a lot closer with him because of it, which is something that I've truly appreciated.
That's awesome. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people who are parents or have families have appreciated it. Some more than others. Some are like, I'm out of here. This is not what I signed up for. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I will say one thing that makes me really sad. I don't know why it makes me so sad. I mean, obviously, it's important, but like seeing like young kids and like high schoolers and stuff worrying constantly about like, or having anxiety about like wearing, having to wear masks and watching, all these rules. Like, you remember when we were, when we were in high school or college or whatever, it was kind of just like we didn't have to think about any of that. It was just kind of just like, oh well, we're gonna go get bubble tea, or we're gonna go and watch a football game or whatever. Whereas I don't know. I mean, I haven't interacted with many young people in that age group, but it seems more stressful. It seems so much more stressful as like both as a parent and as a child.
Yeah.
Um, at least for those that are in school and have to follow all these rules, and who you hang out with, or who is sick or who isn't. It's like 10 times more bigger
Yeah.
now, it seems.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
in fact, if any of you, anyone in the chat, or if you have interacted with someone, from that age group and heard anything about this, I'd love to hear it, because it just, and it's just a observation that I've made. I don't actually know if that's what's happening. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So Joel in the chat says, I'm glad everything came out well with Mahina and Teresa after her COVID diagnosis. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that. Manib says, I was blessed enough that the pandemic didn't affect me or my family, but I'm just grateful nothing bad happened, because there are a lot of people who had it worse and can't recover from it. Yeah, absolutely. Always good to be grateful for, what we have, and
yeah,
getting through all that.
it's been a blessing and a curse in many ways. It's been a blessing in the, I know most people might not agree with this, but it's been a blessing in the sense that, like, I know for some people, I've definitely talked to some people who said like their priorities in life are much clearer now, in terms of like, you know, it helped to push away a lot of people's distractions out of life, and like show them, okay, these are your real friends, these are your real family, these are the people who care about you, these are the people who are there for you, and this is what you should focus on. Or maybe people with significant others, plenty of couples wanted to get married and realized, I know a few couples that said, that they wanted to get married and realize that like that was for them, and the pandemic helped them realize that. I don't, it's been interesting. And then other people unfortunately lost someone in their family and had to deal with, you know, reorganizing or reprioritizing their life in that way. So
Yeah, for sure. Joel says in the chat, I'm blessed all my family members that have caught COVID. All of them made it. Even both set of grandparents caught it and they pulled through. This was before the vaccine. That's good to hear, Joel. Glad that everybody's doing well and made it through. Manib says, yeah, my nephews were in grade school and the pandemic made it hard because you couldn't socialize in school and the learning was not good with remote. Yeah, I mean, I've heard tons of stories of that, of remote learning and students just not, it's just not been successful, and that's been a challenge for both students and parents to kind of deal with, and teachers as well.
Yeah. For kids, socialization is like key, right? It's like so key, I think. And so, I don't know, it like eroded that to some degree. And I don't know, it makes me anxious just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's been interesting, but I guess here we are after all this time, and we'll see what the future holds.
It's okay. Omarion will be gone before you know it.
And then what's the 16th letter of the alphabet or whatever, whatever the next alphabet,
we can start, what we should start giving like all these variants hip hop like names. Like that'd be fun. That would be kind of fun. Like you hear the news and it's all doom and gloom on the news lately. So today a new variant of the virus came out. I don't know. Insert hip hop rap name here. Like,
I mean, it's all fun and games until someone dies of that variant, and then I know.
I'm just being silly. Man, gotta just find a way to laugh at something, honestly, because it's all just it's been rough. It's been rough for so many people. So
yeah. Well, shall we wrap things up?
Sure. Yeah. Let's. I just want to ask Manib and Joel, since they're still on here, if they have anything else to add, and also just want to thank them for joining again.
Yeah, so there will be a delay probably, and kind of waiting for a response. So maybe we can wrap through our sort of ending thoughts, and then see if they have anything else at the end.
Right.
You want to go for?
Yeah, sorry. That's So I don't know about you, but I thought it was an interesting discussion. It felt like it was more like a free-flowing conversation, but it was still good and I enjoyed it. And we hope you enjoyed it too. And if you have any thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Please feel free to post in the comments box below if you didn't catch us live, and share any other topics or suggestions that you may have that you'd like to hear us talk about in the future. We are thinking about bringing on a guest in maybe in the next upcoming couple episodes. So we would love to hear your thoughts, and we're also going to be posting another Twitter poll that we would love to get you to participate in. So
yeah, thank you to those that voted the last time. So be on the
Yes.
lookout for that. And if you do have any questions or comments, later on, please don't feel like this is the only time that you can reach out. You can always reach out to us anytime through our social media. So we're on Twitter at the Dose of Desi, and our email is the Dose of Desi pod at gmail.com. So definitely, utilize that. Let us know what it is. Manib in the chat says every day was pretty boring after work during the pandemic, just watching reruns on TV. Joel says, thank you guys for sharing these stories with us. Always fun to listen. Looking forward to the next episode. Will this be the last one for 2021? Well, thank you both again for sharing your thoughts. Appreciate it. Always great having you here. I think we will probably have to confirm and discuss afterwards. I think it's just a matter of scheduling and holidays coming up and all that, trying to figure out what the best time is for the next episode. So I would say just keep an eye on social media to know when the next episode is. But probably I would imagine like the beginning of January might be the next, just because if we, in the next like couple weeks is already going to be like the holiday time.
We should do a holiday
already.
one.
We could. It's just a matter of the holidays this year seem to fall on a weekend, and we tend to record, that seems to work best for us. And so I don't know how many people are going to step away from family to listen to us. So, that's
here's what I'm going to say. Joel, I'm going to try to convince Hassan to do one more, but will I be successful? I don't know. So
I'll say stay tuned, but Happy New Year. And we'll figure it out from there. But either way, again, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll be notified. It'll pop up in your subscription feed whenever we schedule the next episode as well. That's the best way to go about it. So we're very excited about just continuing this. This has been a lot of fun so far. So we hope you've been enjoying it. Thank you all so much for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks again.